Hello, hello, everybody. Can you all hear me loud and clear? Already, I am so thrilled to welcome this fantastic group to Poets and Writers California Town Hall event today. Thank you so much for joining us from throughout our beautiful state of California. My name is Jamie Asaye FitzGerald, and I'm the Director of Poets and Writers Readings and Workshops West program in our California office. And I am based in Los Angeles on the traditional land of the Gabrielino Tongva people. And I'm here with my colleague, Jalen, who I will let introduce himself.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everybody. I'm Jalen. I'm the Programs and Partnerships Assistant for Poets and Writers, and I'm based in the East in New York City. And I'm really excited to be here at this town hall with you all in California.
So Jalen's going to be helping today with the behind the scenes tech work and also moderating our Q&A and chat room. So thank you, Jalen, so much for your support. You all probably know Poets and Writers for our magazine, but for about 20 years at least, we have also been holding these community building events. Sometimes they're called literary roundtables, sometimes they're called check-ins, sometimes they're called town halls. They are all to help us fulfill our mission, which is to foster the professional development of poets and writers, promote communication throughout the literary community, and to ensure that literature can be appreciated by the widest possible public. We'd like to thank the California Arts Council for its support of these events. Jalen's going to share our meeting agenda in the chat. And we invite you to also use the chat as a place to ask questions, to comment, to express your appreciation, and to share resources during the event. We'll begin with our guest speaker, and after that we'll have a little time for questions from the group and discussion. And permitting time, we will hopefully be able to hear from all of you. If you have events that you would like to announce, projects that you're working on that you like to share with the group, or things like calls for submissions, if you're a magazine editor or that type of thing, we'll have time to share that. And I also wanted to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be shared on the Poets and Writers YouTube channel, so that folks who weren't able to come today can listen in and hear from our guest speaker and hear what's going on in the community. So you are invited to keep your camera on or to turn your camera off if you prefer. Either way is fine. So with that, I just like to remind everyone to stay muted if possible when others are speaking, so that we don't have any sound interference. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful special guest, traci kato-kiriyama, an artist working at multiple intersections and always where creativity meets community, which is the topic she's built her talk around today. Traci kato-kiriyama, also referred to sometimes as TKK, I think. Is that all right? Great. Moves from the inward act of creation and blossoms outward, profuse as a jacaranda tree in spring, with external acts of activism, event curation, mentorship, and multidisciplinary performance. Her recent book, Navigating Without Instruments, which I have here, published by The Accomplices and Writ Large Press, is a uniquely structured collection of poetry, micro essays, and notes coded for various entities, such as the self, community, the world, the reader, the newcomer, the Asian American artist community, and to quote, allies of us queers. As an artist and storyteller, or artivist rather, and storyteller, TKK is grounded in collaborative process, collective self-determination, and art plus community as intrinsically tied and a critical means toward connection and healing. Her entire bio will be pasted into the chat, and I just wanted to highlight that she describes their career as wildly hybrid. And I think it's wildly hybrid and wonderful. Their work has appeared in a wide swathe of media and print. You'll recognize some of these names: NPR, PBS. If you're from the Los Angeles region, you'll recognize Tia Chucha Press. If you're from Northern California, you might recognize Heyday Books. TKK is a core artist of Vigilant Love, a member of the HR 40, commissioned to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans Act. She's a member of the coalition and an organizer with the Nikkei Progressives and Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress Joint Reparations Committee. And they are director and co-founder of Tuesday Night Project. If you're in the LA area, you would be familiar with the Tuesday Night Cafe series in Little Tokyo. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Okay, I need to go back to gallery views for a second for myself. It's like, whoa, whenever that speaker view comes on. I want to see all your faces. Thank you so much. I appreciate whatever state you're in to have your photo up or your video on, whatever feels great for you, but it is awesome to see faces. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and start from there. Okay. Folks are good to see that? Okay. So just wanted to start with a short land acknowledgement and give shout outs to the Calderon family, who've really, I think, taught our groups a lot about various communities here. And so I want to recognize the Tongva, the Quiche, the Gabrielino, the Hashemen, the Fernandino Tataviam, the Chumash, and many others that make up what is known as Los Angeles County. And I think about the ways in which we're connected through our resources, especially water. There's a really wonderful film called Manzanar Diverted, which talks about the different communities up in the Owens Valley who are all coming together to address water rights issues and land issues. So through that, I've realized our connections go well beyond just what we're here in Los Angeles County experiencing, but also with the Muwekma Ohlone land, the Paiahunadu, which are the lands of the Numu and the Newe, the land of the Mono Lake Katsudika tribe. And then beyond that, several states draw water from what's known as the Colorado River. And that links us to the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, and the Ute peoples. And I'm sure many of you seen this particular link that you can look on so that you can check out your particular land and tribes. So let me, I need to have my timer on because I want to get to conversation too, and I don't want to go too long. So yes, here we go. Wanted to give a brief intro. My name is Traci Kato-Kiriyama. My pronouns are they and she. You can call me TKK or Trey or Tracy. I am an multi-transdisciplinary artist, meaning that I pull from various disciplines, collaborate with other disciplines, as well as invest in systems of process and collaboration that sort of draw from our processes all around as artists and creative beings. So I work in the worlds of theater devising, as a writer and actor, and also in the literary arts arena. I've been a student of poetry for, I would say, 25 years, and will always be a student of poetry. And sometimes, often calling myself a poet, but I feel very much a student always. I do some work in public performance and installation, sometimes working with large scale projections, in conversation, bringing, sort of buildings in our city in conversation with each other. And then I do a lot of multimedia collaboration, and I also do some voice work. I just finished narrating Marie Kondo's next book, which is called Kudashi at Home. That's coming out in November. It was really great because by the end of the session, myself, my director and engineer, we were all like, okay, gotta go. We gotta go home and clean. We were very inspired by that book. I just want to give a shout out to the other queer pansexual unicorns in the room, the folks who are tied to in some way Los Angeles, folks who have gone through cancer and have beat it, but are still, what I think maybe some people don't understand, always going through it, always, we have a relationship with it forever. I am an artivist and artist organizer. I work with many different organizations here in LA, but also through a couple of coalitions nationally. One formerly known as the HR 40 Coalition, now it's called the Why We Can't Wait Coalition, and it's housed through Human Rights Watch and led by Dreesen Heath, also though with legacy reparations groups who are our advisors for the National Nikkei Reparations Coalition. I'm going to talk more about Tuesday Night Project on the latter half. And then I just want to also put out there the name Vigilant Love. We have a Solidarity Arts Fellowship. If you know young Muslim and Japanese American 18 to 25-year-old artists and activists, we have a 6-month fellowship, which is really robust and really is about long-term relationship building, facing issues of Islamophobia, of surveillance, and in solidarity with other communities facing the same issues. So please do come to that, and or have your folks come to that. I also wanted to just spend a little bit of time saying about my background. I'm a daughter and grandchild of survivors of Manzanar and Tule Lake. And those were sites of World War II American concentration camps. And I use that term along with many others who've taught me to use that term. And it's not to be confused with the euphemisms of relocation centers or internment camps that are more commonly used. Internment camps they do not refer to places where citizens are housed. And 2/3 of the folks in the camps were citizens, and they were of families who were all, making a life here and contributing to society. Relocation centers are in imminent sort of evacuation processes when you're talking about natural disasters. But it's also not to be confused with Nazi death camps or extermination camps that often use the euphemism of concentration camps. So just always like to put that out there in the beginning when I'm talking about these different terms. All of this to say, a lot of this appears in my work in a couple major projects. One, this book that Jamie shouted out, Navigating Without Instruments. I was trying to work on it in 2013, and I thought I would have it out by 2014. I was telling everybody, oh yeah, the book coming out in 2014. And it didn't come out till December of 2021. And I spent 8 years of running away from it. I had a lot of psychological blocks. I had the usual life and career things, working with an indie publisher, as awesome and mighty as they are. I had to take other work, of course, and I love my work. So I have a hard time saying no to things. And all in between all of that, I was diagnosed with cancer in 2016. My publisher was like, you know, your life is more important than a book. You can consider not doing this book. And I was like, that really pisses me off. Don't say that. I must finish this book, but I just need more time. And they're like, of course. And they gave me so much love when I think others would have definitely given up on me. But a lot of what this book is about, so to speak, it's not one story. It's really a collection of many memories, of many processes of excavation of history that I think was meant to be kept from us. It's an exploration of friendship and solidarity, self-determination and creative process, and art and so-called success. And yeah, an exploration of place and the intersections of art and community, and our relations, as well as diving into the stuff that was hard to face, the hardest to face, you know, in terms of family, ideation, mental health, and the like. As I was working on this book, I was also pretty much simultaneously or kind of in tandem working on a play called Tales of Clamor. And I wanted to talk specifically about these two projects, in that with Tales of Clamor, not only was I working on it at the same time that I was working on the book, but you know, I was asked to speak about this idea of the intersection of art and community. And I think oftentimes, you know, even in my writing process, there were people who would tell me like, you should just stop, you know, the meetings and the activism, which I always found funny to call it the activism. But people would say you could stop the activism for a while and just concentrate on writing, you know. But I don't feel like in some instances I'm wearing my artist hat, and then others I'm wearing an organizer hat, and then others I'm wearing an educator hat. I kind of feel like my goal is to walk into the room with a stack of hats always on. And when I feel off balance, it's because I realize that one hat has been knocked off, right? And so the two spaces of community and art, they just are tied for me. And I say this a lot, that, you know, art is sort of my what and my how, and community is really my why. So I can't be away from it too long. It really grounds me. The conversations that I have with multiple generations, it affects the way I tell stories, and it reminds me always of why I'm doing it. Tales of Clamor is a play about the dynamics of cultural and institutionalized silence and the path toward collective noise, and it moves back and forth between the past and present. In the upper right corner, you see a picture of myself and my stage partner, Kennedy Capasares, who is a circus artist. He's the only one that does circus in the show. I'm very firmly on the ground. In Tales of Clamor, we have a chorus of 5 other actors, and we go back and forth between the present and our debates about institutionalized and cultural silence and the values and the detriments of those things. And we go to the past, where our chorus of 5 actors play several characters representing different parts of our community who was trying to get others to speak, to break their silence about the psychological impact and the economic loss during their experience being incarcerated during the war. And we are theater based, and we utilize circus and movement and other things as ways to tell the story. And we use circus both literally and metaphorically. And this picture that you see here of our elder Takayo Fisher, she's the oldest actor in our ensemble. And she was an actual survivor of the Jerome and Rower concentration camps during World War II. And towards the arc of the show, when we see the folks walking towards what was called the commission hearings, where in 1981, folks finally did break their silence in public, in a room of multiple communities who came out to speak out in support, as well as in front of their families, saying stories for the first time out loud. So we utilized this device, which is a practice tightrope. It's 10 feet long and about 2.5 to 3 feet high. And we had each actor cross that tightrope to get to the commission hearing table. And everybody was always sort of like breathless when Takayo would cross. And the idea was that not just for safety, but also symbolically, they always crossed with assistance, because that's how we all get across, right? We do it together. And so we wanted to make sure that we could really see each person getting assistance. Sometimes people spoke, sometimes people held the mic, sometimes people arranged the translation and interpreters. Everyone played a different part in speaking up. And so, yeah, so we wanted to show that. And the folks behind this were also, this is a little bit more, these photos are from those hearings that I mentioned in 1981. And this is a big part of when I'm asked to talk about Tales of Clamor, this is a big part of it, not just because it shows up as kind of an anchoring point in our show when we're looking at collective noise, but really it's, I like to talk about the partnership behind this piece. The young folks, the Sansei, the third generation, who were not sure of where they were born in Manzanar. They thought maybe they were born in a summer camp. They were suffering at the time in the 70s with a lot of identity issues, not feeling like they belonged anywhere. There were lots of overdoses in our community. And there was a lot of stigma in terms of reaching out for help. Parents, instead of talking about their trauma or even losing their children to drugs, they would say that their children had headaches and died from normal causes or natural causes. And so there was just a lot of folks who did not want to face the past. But the third generation, they were activated, they were politicized by the Third World Liberation Movement. They were working in solidarity alongside the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, the Hopi Nation, the Lakota. They were learning. A lot of folks from all of these communities said, hey, do you know that your people were put away into camps? You should go look into that. You should look into your own history too, And so it really set a lot of our people off on a journey to go literally open the gates that were locked. I was not meant to be sitting here talking to you about this today. We were not meant to be making art around this because all of that was locked up. None of these efforts were the government saying, hey, we want to make sure that we educate the public about what we did, right? Just as I think I've learned over time with so many other communities, right? And just the lack of education and acknowledgement, and therefore reckoning with our past. So it makes sense to me that these folks, who went and excavated and were learning so much about themselves in relationship to others in this larger cycle of oppression, right? And these cycles put forth by our institutions and foundations, they were very motivated to try to seek justice. And I saw footage of this. I saw footage of these hearings when I was in college, and it really blew me away because I was witnessing people who were emotional and angry and articulate and so present in their pain in public. And these were all things that no media up to that point had ever shown me as like a typical thing of my people. And so that was really overwhelming for me. And these folks also going through these movements always put forth storytelling, narrative, collective, and art. They put art, they understood the necessity of storytelling and art in our movements. And so it's no wonder that these folks became, my principal partners in developing that show. Oh, sorry, not quite there yet. So people who became my mentors and older siblings and big sisters much later, they were these folks who organized here, and they never stopped organizing. To this day, they're now in their 70s, 60s and 70s, and they are still kicking ass and still building relationships across many lines. The other thing that I found overwhelming when I watched this footage, I watched all 23 hours, and you can too. It's on vcmedia.org. When I watched this footage, I really understood that we didn't do it by ourselves. Every other community came out and spoke in public in support. Mervyn Dimely was the first person to bring in the Congressional Black Caucus, and he created two of the first pieces of legislation for Japanese American redress and reparations. So, our involvement today is somewhat, not just in reciprocity, it's just the acknowledgement that we are with each other, we belong to each other, and we need to do reckoning together, right, in order to move forward truly, I think, as a country and a society. So these are the folks that I think really brought me into that. And then in the 90s, I was a young theater artist, a young poet, a student of poetry, and we knew that we needed some way to gather. And I was really inspired by what I was seeing in other communities in Highland Park, in Leimert Park, in East LA, Boyle Heights, where people were having multidisciplinary, multi-generational events, bringing in people, and you would see like a punk band, and then you would have a youth or an elder come out and talk about what was happening in their organizing in different parts of the city or the country or even the world. And we were searching for something like that amongst Asian and Pacific Islanders in LA. And we realized we just needed to try to co-create it ourselves. And so again, just like how NCRR was a principal creative collaborator in Tales of Clamor, not being a group of people who identify as artists, not an arts organization, same thing when it came to us trying to find a space. In LA, we went to Little Tokyo, where a lot of us, had a lot of affinity and a lot of life experience, but it was at a time in the 90s where, I don't know if you all have been to Little Tokyo or downtown LA. I think a lot of Californians on this call have heard of Little Tokyo and have visited, but in the 90s, if I asked that question, a lot of people did not really go to hang out in Little Tokyo or in downtown LA for that matter. And pre-war, there were over 80 Japantowns across the country, and now there are 4 that have official designations. And again, that was purposeful. We were not meant to go back and reconvene and recreate and rebuild our communities. We were meant to be dispersed and isolated and separated. So there was a lot of thought about Little Tokyo dying, another Little Tokyo dying. And so we approached Little Tokyo Service Center, and they said, they said yes. They said, try something, create a space. And again, this is not an arts organization. They're a community development group, but they also came up through the movement, and they understood the power of art and storytelling to bring people together. So that brings me to this last photo. When you all come in April, and I see you here at the Union Center for the Arts, this is the courtyard in front of the building. It's a formerly abandoned church that was turned into an art center where East West Players exists, visual communications, and an art gallery called LA Art Corps. And in the front is where we gathered. And we started that in February of 1999, and we never stopped. I didn't think that we would necessarily keep going, but we just did. And I think it's because it comes from that idea that we need places, that we need, when we have programs that thrive, it's because there's a need. And, we are celebrating our 25th year next year of existence. It is a good time. I had a great meeting with the Downtown Central Library, and they're going to host something with us. And they felt bad. They're like, oh my gosh, we're down the street, and they'd never heard of us. But I never, I never take offense. That's the thing about, I think, LA. You can be here for 20, 30 years and then meet something and some space that's been around for that long too. And there's always something to uncover, right? And so I invite you all to come and join us. Sign up sign up with us. It's an Asian American run space, but it's not exclusive. We also consider ourselves an LA space and art space. And so we have featured acts, but we also have an open mic. And, you know, we just really are about bringing folks together. I know my time is quickly, it's pretty much out, but I do want to just close by saying, you know, for me, when I think about art plus community as one word, I do think about, as an artist going into collaboration, you know, I'm grounded by the community organizing brain. You know, in theater, we have to be scrappy. It's like, who has what resources, but also who's not in the room that could and should and needs to be. What's the narrative need? How does this work serve the greater good? As an organizer, the artist in me must always be in the room. Whether or not the product or the campaign is directly artistic, the artist is in constant practice of diving to question the often unanswerable. And we learn to trust the process and value what it takes to stay in the room. And to stay in the room harkens back to and circles forward to the organizing person, right? That teaches me the ideals of struggle. And struggle is not just about existing in a stasis of pain, but to struggle through something together, to confront together, as well as with and amongst each other. And I think both the artist and the organizer works at connecting the dots. And I think artists brilliantly connect personal, political, emotional, spiritual, intellectual dots. And that's what I hope to do. I hope to confront and connect and to excavate and shake the foundations and to uplift our roots that have been disappeared or denied justice and peace and love. So yeah, that's sort of how I try to operate and exist in the world and why I do it. And these are some of the folks that I get to work with. And I really hope to interact with more of you. So I really am grateful for this time. I hope to be of use. So please ask and offer up your thoughts. And I will stop sharing the screen.
How fantastic. Thank you so much, Tracy. So we're going to open things up to the group. We can do it two ways at the same time. You can use the reactions controls down at the bottom of your Zoom screen to raise a hand. And you can put your question, or you can put your question in the chat. And we will kind of go back and forth between those two areas with Jalen's help. So
you do have an echo or a vibration, a vibrato in your voice.
I do?
Yes. At least on mine.
Okay.
Anybody else hear that?
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Are you working with two mics?
No, just one. Just one. But I'll mute myself in a moment. Jalen, do we have any questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet, and everyone is welcome to drop some in the chat if you like, or use the raise your hand feature. And yeah, we'll begin the Q&A session.
I have a question I can kick things off with. And it is about the structure of your book and the coding and the thought processes behind how you structured it. I'd love to hear more about that.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so I was writing into a lot of different themes and stories, and it was starting to feel unwieldy. And thankfully, my publishers, they just said, just let it be a big book. Just lean in and understand that we will follow the narrator, and you as the poet, you're the anchor, right? The anchor, the narrator's the anchor to the story. So as long as we understand this is your POV and we stay anchored with you, we'll be fine, right? And I mentioned, having psychological blocks and things, and having to face certain things and running away from this book. And I was thinking a lot about sort of poetry as a trigger for many, many things. As we read or hear someone read, right, it brings up a lot. So the book starts with this repetitive line, and it just says, warning, a book of poetry is a trigger. Warning, a book of poetry is a trigger. Warning, a book of poetry is a trigger. A book of poetry is a trigger warning. And then it goes into 12 sections. And each of the sections are led in by an icon. And these icons come from survival guides from the 40s and 50s. I've been collecting them for many, many years. I find them really fascinating. In particular, there is a survival guide from the United States Army and Air Forces with like absolutely no copyright page or anything. It literally just says United States Army and Air Forces. And the idea is that if you are stranded with your airplane, you would have these large pieces of paper that are yellow and blue, and depending on how you fold it, it would signal what your situation is. So this one says, have abandoned plane walking in this direction. And so I knew when I saw that I wanted to start my book that way. And then when I was putting the book together, there are 12 icons in total. And I wanted to, I just wanted to have 9 sections. For some reason in my mind, I did not want to have more than 9 sections in my book. And I was determined. But then as I was actually just like spreading all the papers together and putting them in piles, and my partner Joyce was helping, it happened to just go into 12 piles. And then I was like, okay. So then I took out all the icons, and we just started going to work on what felt like a good match, and the lead in and the storytelling behind these symbols. So so I ended up using them all, and they'll say things like need tools, plane is flyable, need first aid supplies, need medical attention, do not attempt landing, okay to land, different things. I find so much inspiration in these oddly written, sometimes really problematically written survival guides from the 40s and 50s, but they're super fascinating. And so that's how it goes. And so there's poetics, there creative correspondence, there's lots of notes, sometimes poetic, sometimes very straightforward, mini essays, micro essays. And my main thing at the end of the day was what kinds of conversations do I want to have when this book comes out? I'm spending so much time on it. I know I'm going to travel with it. So that's what I think allowed me to lean in to the many different threads that I wanted to talk about with different kinds of people, with strangers, with friends, with family. So that's been really overwhelming and really beautiful to experience so many conversations with all those folks, strangers, family, friends. And yeah, so yeah, that's sort of how it's structured a little bit.
Thank you, Tracy. We are still inviting questions, but we also have just some nice messages in the chat. Marlana Patrice, she writes, I love your use of the icons. Kevin says that was amazing, Tracy. And we also have 2 shout outs to J-Towns. Deborah is shouting out from a San Jose J-Town. And Lizetta is just sharing about how they visited all 4 Japanese towns multiple times due to a connection with their aunt, beginning in San Francisco as children, and they've just kept on going.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, a lot of engagement with what you're saying.
That's amazing. Lizetta, I'd love to hear more. That's so cool. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Yeah. And I always say in these spaces, like, you can literally ask me anything. Any curiosity. It's cool. Like, it's okay. You can ask. Oh,
We do have a hand raised from Lisette, I think.
Yeah,
Lizetta.
is that a, yeah. Oh, I guess I should put my, yeah. My sisters and I used to visit my Aunt Lily in San Francisco every summer. We're from LA, but she'd always take us to Japantown all the time. And she'd always buy us treat. And we got the tabbies with the little metal clasp on the back of them for Christmas gifts every Christmas. And when we go to Japantown, she'd buy us fans, she'd buy us dolls, but she bought all of her seasoning that she prepared her food with. So even her Cornish hens, which are a northwestern Louisiana favorite, she'd season hers with Japanese seasonings. And so and my sister Deborah's in on this too, but that really influenced my embrace of Japanese culture and foods. And my family, my sisters and I are a first generation children born to migrants who came from Louisiana and Texas. Ours came from Louisiana. And when we were children in elementary school, we still had a lot of Japanese students in LA, in our elementary school and our junior high school and our high school. So me and you know, if I bring peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to school for lunch, my friends wanted mine. They wanted my cheese sandwiches. I wanted their rice balls. So, you know, it was all of this trading back and forth. And I have to say this, when I graduated from high school, went to community college, I met my friend, Judy Seguchi, and Judy, myself, and Oswaldo, who was from Spain, all of us rode from Los Angeles to Chicago to meet her uncle in her Carmen Ghia. This was in 1967 or 8. And it was all of us in this little car. And it was a lovely trip. Her uncle was a medical doctor at a university. So yeah, it was, but there's always been this engagement because of how I was brought up, where I lived in LA. And so there was always this interaction, I think more so with Japanese students than anyone else, because they had returned, you know, to different areas that they were taken away up from in San Francisco and in LA. So yeah, so that's my story.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Lizetta. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
I hope you've written or are writing about that.
I did. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'd love to
Your
read
book
it.
took how many? 8? Mine took longer. I'm seasons at Lakeside Dairy, and it's about that migration from Louisiana to LA and what my parents and my mother's siblings found in LA. And it talks about the different communities that were there. And I have written about that. And I have written about our trips to San Francisco and our favorite things that we got from Japantown. So that's all in that book.
Oh, wow. I really
Yeah.
want to read that. I mean, I
Yeah.
just think like the sharing of these stories is so necessary, like
Yeah.
at this time. I think it's always been necessary, but I
Yeah.
think especially at a time where a lot of narratives in the media are always trying to kind of, they're never about like these connections.
No, they aren't.
Right,
They aren't. They
you know?
really aren't. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think
No.
so much of the news, when people are talking about violence in our communities, a lot of times they racialize it and really try to
Yeah.
draw wedges between our communities and not really ever highlight the really rich relationships
Yeah.
and solidarity and friendship and love that we
Yeah.
have built in our communities,
No, and this goes, I'm 73. This goes back years. So yeah. So it's yeah. So because of my aunt, I always gravitated to Japan towns in different places. So
Mhm.
all of those 4 that are mentioned, sure, yeah. I've been there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I invite you and everyone here, like when we come back in April to the Tuesday Night Cafe, I'd love to host you there.
Yeah.
It'd be
Great.
really lovely. And
Sure.
bring your friend.
Sure, sure.
Let's all go to Tuesday Cafe in April if you're in LA. We'll meet up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rosetta. I just moved into Jefferson Park, which is a neighborhood that historically has been the African American community and Japanese American community, a place where those two communities mixed and lived together before the war.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to learn about the history. I think we have a question in the chat.
We do. We'll start with Leanne asked the question a few minutes ago. And they're asking, Tracy, as you move from poem to poem, do you embody different space, different ancestors? Thank you, Leanne.
Do I embody different space and different ancestors?
Yes.
That's a great question. I think I'm always thinking about my ancestors. For example, my partner, she cracks jokes when I'm writing. She's always like, "Are you writing a poem about me? You better be writing a poem about me." And then, I really wanted to, and then I ended up writing a poem really more about my dad. but the idea is that it's this piece towards the end of the book about imagining the ability to introduce my father, who died in 2005, to my partner, who I didn't meet till 10 years later. And so I think I'm, always reimagining sort of the past into the future, and so in that way, I think I am always thinking about who anchors me. I think a lot, and it probably came through as I was talking today, how much the people before me, I give so much credit to, my big siblings, cousins, elders, mentors, my parents, and I think I didn't realize until really writing that play and then writing a particular section of this book, I really didn't realize till that process how much I actually am driven by my grandfather, who, died when I was 4. But I think about him a lot, and I'm always searching for better stories about him, kinder stories, more uplifting stories. He had a big struggle with drinking, and he came out of camp a different man, and he didn't fall into a lot of the success stories that people like to talk about in our community. And he died before redress. And so I think there's a big part of me that has a fire because of that. I think it really drives me. In terms of spaces, I love thinking about space, yeah, I do think that writing into different themes and areas of our life, it gives us like that kind of like metaphysical spiritual space, right, to enter into and intersect in. And it's like a play space that I need to have, right? It's a place that I need to be able to explore what different relationships could look like, right? Beyond heartbreak, beyond the heartbreak of living in this country, beyond, you know, what we have right now. So space, to me, I'm always thinking about that, you know, space in that way. And then of course, literally, I do think about place and Los Angeles. And I feel like for me as a Scorpio who is often misunderstood, I feel like LA is very much that. I wrote a piece about that. You know, I just think I feel like I have a lot in common with LA in that way, you know, where people just have all these like really amazingly harsh opinions about Los Angeles without really having like spent time here, like quality non-Disneyland time, you know what I mean? And so I've been in so many debates and arguments with folks from everywhere. and I think sometimes I take it to heart because I'll meet brilliant people in other places. I met some brilliant organizers and artists in Toronto doing really incredible work. And they're like, yeah, we want to come out west, but probably San Francisco. Because they'd already built up all this narrative about Los Angeles. And I was like, San Francisco's awesome. Like, definitely do that. Go to the Bay, for sure. Go to the East Bay, for sure. But come on. LA's got amazing people. And I love, and again, it always goes back to people. I think that's a thing. If I'm thinking about place, inevitably, I'm always coming back to people. Because it's not this city, you know, this city is chock full of really horrible problems and systems and institutions for sure. But yeah, I think the people fighting to make it what it is and can be are amazing to me.
Yeah. Does Sheila still have a question?
Yes, I'll briefly describe an experience and ask a question which might not be answerable, but my experience is this. I went to Cimarron Avenue Elementary School in LA in Hawthorne near Inglewood. And in 5th grade, I had a Japanese teacher. And at one point she told us that she and her sister were in concentration camp and that they were separated from her parents. And that's really all I remember. I didn't have much context. She didn't elaborate a lot. But a curious thing was, you know, in most public schools, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. We had a patriotic routine that she instituted that lasted maybe 10 minutes every morning. And it grew from the beginning of the year, but it included the national anthem and other patriotic songs and reciting the preamble to the Constitution and part of the Gettysburg Address. And just a very, and I think she was involved. She was very conservative, and some of these things I gather later, like some of the things she talked about, like fluoride in the water, I think she might have been involved in the John Burke Society. If anybody knows what that is or was, it was a very reactionary, conservative political movement. And it's just such a puzzle to me. And I just wondered if she, you know, where that sort of hyper patriotism came from and how it fits in with her, sorry about my daughter's dog, how it fits in with her experience, which she only mentioned that one time. And she was a very strict, very very captivating in both senses of the word. And like, we wanted to please her, but she was very, you know, strict and kind of mean sometimes and racist sometimes toward Mexican and Black children. So I don't, this is just one person, but I thought of her when you were talking about the silences, and it's just an odd combination. And I don't know if it's relevant to talk about or not, but I'm throwing that out there.
Yeah, Sheila, thank you. No, I think it's definitely relevant. You know, I think when you're talking, I was thinking about a few things, you know, back then, and then in the generation after, the third generation that I mentioned, in the beginning when they were organizing and finding out more stories, more about their own history, there were folks of that generation who at the time would say things like, yeah, why didn't you protest? Why didn't you make a stink, you know? And then years later, after more uncovering of more information and more understanding of the cultural context in the United States, the fear, the shame that people felt. And when I say fear, it's literally down to the fact that on December 7th, the FBI literally came in and took fathers from their families. And I was just having this conversation today with Kathy Masaoka about in the Bay Area, and not the Bay Area, it's like Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, that area. There were only 2,000 Japanese families at the time, Japanese and Japanese Americans. And of 2,000, in the days on December 7th and in the days after, the FBI came and took 250 of the men. They took the leaders and the fathers from the families. And people did not know what was going to happen. People did not see their fathers and spouses for weeks and oftentimes months, right? And some people never found their father again. So Lawson Inada has a beautiful poem where he talks about, you know, people ask why didn't people protest? Well, the FBI, they had hostages. You know what I mean? When you strip all your leaders, your parents from your home, and I have people come to me now telling me about their remembrances as non-Japanese American children traumatized by seeing their friends and neighbors. Ron Dellums has a very compelling testimony on YouTube that you can watch, Congressman Ron Dellums. When he was testifying in support of Japanese American redress, he talks about his friend, his best friend, being stripped away from him. It's really incredible to witness his testimony. And then I also thought about my uncle. My uncle Roy, my mom's older brother, you know, he's now in his 80s. He grew up in a household where my grandfather spoke Japanese and my grandma spoke like broken English, broken Japanese. She was born in Santa Cruz. And my uncle is like some folks who came out of that experience determined to be as American as humanly possible, to adopt anything and everything that made them seem as little of a so-called person of color or minority or Japanese person as possible. He's very Republican, he's very conservative. He swears he doesn't speak a lick of Japanese. And that's in one generation, right? He grew up in a house, that was his first language that he was around. So I think that there's a lot of trauma, and that I don't think it's actually odd. I think it's terrible when people are stripped so far down that they feel they need to extract themselves from who they are and their families and their ancestors and their culture or part of their culture. But I understand it too. But I think that these lead us to challenging conversations, you know. And once in a while, I try to engage with my family, my uncle, around some of these things, and it's these are hard conversations, but I do think those are also really necessary conversations too. So, but you can definitely read up a lot on that, and I think that that's why for many of us challenging the model minority stereotype, you know, this comes up a lot. Because while there are definitely folks who like to invest within our community and all around us in that model minority stereotype and myth, there are a lot of us who want to challenge it. And Mia Iwataki most recently testified before the AB 3121, the California Reparations Task Force had a hearing and invited her to speak. And she talked about the model minority myth as being despicable, right? Because it serves only to divide us. And it also doesn't acknowledge actual struggles and trauma and real problems that are actually happening. in all of our communities. So yeah, it's a good one. That's a big one. I could talk about that for all day. But those are some of my initial thoughts when you bring that up. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you everyone for your questions and comments. And I just wanted to comment on something I've noticed in your talk, which is that you talk a lot about different generations. And I know you do a lot of work with the different generations, from young people to older people. And I think it's just really beautiful to hear how, you're crossing, all these time periods and generations. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on just the generation before us. I think we're in the same generation, you and I. Sansei generation now, it's the last generation to have memories of being in the camps, perhaps. And they're aging now. And so our generation, your generation, is now tasked with carrying the torch to continue to tell stories. And I was wondering if you could just comment on that a little bit as the final question.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, for so long, understandably, there were many efforts to document oral histories of our Nisei generation, our second generation, because so many Issei, so many first generation died. And, they're the ones who, the Nisei will always say, like the first generation, they're the ones who really, really suffered. People like my grandfather that I'm talking about, they really had everything stripped from them. Dignity, identity, language, land, spiritual practice, self-determination for sure. And, but, they were gone too soon. So most of them did not have their stories documented, and a lot of them didn't want to talk about it. So there have been many efforts to document Nisei generation, people like my mom, who was a child in camp. And I think what I'm concerned about at this point is capturing, the third generation. I find them really like amazing, fascinating, and so important to these narratives of activism and organizing, community building. They're of the generation who started nonprofit organizations that, we sort of like exist on their coattails now. And many of them are still active. And they're in their 70s. And I know some of my own mentors are losing their memories, and they're dealing with early signs of different situations that yet are not allowing them to access those memories. So I think about that because I'm like, this is such a fascinating generation, folks who went through like the 60s and 70s and like kicked so much butt and like are still like at it and still relating with each other from across communities. And these folks are, I don't know, I'm just like, I think about it a lot. And so I try to, when I can, do like homage pieces, little by little. And I know other people in the community, like Mike Songson, is another person who does a lot of really great homage pieces. And so we talk about that a lot. I mean, I do think we do have, as poets, a good way in a short amount of space to at least not give nods to these other folks' stories, that these people who have done a lot of work before us, whether we know them personally or not. So yeah, and in the book, I talk a lot about permission and creative process. And that's what I'm always trying to urge folks to do, is like write their memoirs, write their family stories in whatever form feels right, and I work a lot with the seniors, who are starting to forget, and trying to help them through a process of like getting those stories down, because it's so important. And you know what I always say in any room, like I can't make assumptions about anyone here. You know, the only assumptions I can make is that we're all really, really different, and we all bring in a legacy of stories before us on top of a huge life experience. And so I just hope everyone writes these things down and shares these stories. And it's why I do this work. So yeah. Thank you so much. This is a
Thank
wonderful
you.
space.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for your generosity and for your presentation. It was amazing to the tightrope and some of the things you said about assistance. You know, that's what kind of being in community is about. We give each other assistance and lift each other up. And on that note, I do want to open things up to the group. You've been encouraged to write your stories. I know you are. I know you're all busy doing stuff. So if anybody would like to make an announcement or share in the chat what their organization might be doing, or upcoming events that you might be doing as a writer, or invite folks here to join, please speak up. Now is your chance to share with the group. Don't be shy. I know you've got stuff going on. I see Saba here.
I see Peggy has a raised hand.
Oh, Peggy.
Thank you. There, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Am I
you.
echoing? No. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you, Tracy. I've invited you to come read so many times, and you're always so busy that it's just a joy to finally get to hear you. And, you know, as someone who curates and works in theater and tries to write my own books, I understand how easy it is to get really focused in your own community. And I feel badly and that I don't get out more. I just have so many things going on. And when I first started in poetry, it was always about going out and seeing what others were doing. But once you get started doing your own, it gets very focused. I want to thank you also for the play. I have seen some of those hours at Westmont College with Facing History and Ourselves, and also worked at length with Desmond Tutu around the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that happened in South Africa. And I think that those stories they're healing for the community, but they are infinitely healing for the person who gets listened to. So often you'll tell something from the bottom of your heart and it just isn't heard because the frame is different. The framing is different. So these spaces are just so incredibly important. And okay, what I have going on is that every day I host a meditation and free write every morning. My good friend Janet Fitch, who I co-teach with, well, I don't co-teach with her, I assist her teaching at the Community of Writers, asked me to do it in 2012 after the January 6th uprising. She said, we just really need to commune. We're so alone. And we started back then and we have met every day for almost 2 years now. It's a very powerful group. It's open for anybody to stop in from 8:30 to 9:45 to just write in community and to sit in silence. Additionally, we've been having some events. We have poet laureates from Pomona and Los Angeles on the second Tuesday of next month at 3 p.m. at the Book Jewel in Westchester. So you're all invited to come see Lynn Thompson and David Judah Oliver, and to share your own poetry at the same time. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Peggy. I hope my echo is gone. Is it still here?
It's awful. I'm a little hard of hearing, but it's really echoing.
Oh yeah, it's almost mechanical.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'm so sorry. It doesn't usually do that. So is it echoing now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Tech. Thank you.
Okay, well, I am so thrilled that you all joined us today, and I want to thank Tracy. Because of the echo, I'm going to follow up with all of you with additional information about poets and writers and our mini grants for writers who are active in the community, writers like Tracy, writers like you. And Tracy has her hand up.
Can I actually announce a couple things?
Yes.
Okay, so I noticed some women who submit folks on the call, and so I would be remiss to not say this. I'll be teaching a workshop on November 12th at 10 a.m. through Women Who Submit. So I do want to shout that out. And then those of you who are in the LA area, next week on Tuesday, October 25th, there's an exhibit through Oxy Arts associated with Occidental College. And so it's called Voice a Wild Dream. And so we're gonna have a special program with Sequoia Mercier of The World Stage, Faye Montes of Mujeres de Maíz, and John Eric Concordia from the Park's Finest. And we're just gonna all talk about organizing in the 90s through now, and just so the intersections between our people and our work and our friendships. And then last thing, this will be virtual. WeHo Reads is going to host Bridget Bianca, Cassandra Lane, Shonda Buchanan, and myself for a virtual reading at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, November 15th. So would love to see y'all at some point. And please reach out. I'll put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tracy.
Thank you everybody for joining us. I'll follow up with the chat and a roster, and I'm sorry about my sound quality. All apologies. Hope to see you at the next event. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Jalen. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.